A data point that shocked me is that negative attitudes towards inter-party marriages is much higher than interfaith or interracial marriages, right? Increasingly, there's a very, very negative view of the other side. Now, political scientists call this affective polarization. It's not political polarization that, ideological distance between two parties, right? They're pro-life, pro-choice, pro-Second Amendment, not pro-Second Amendment and all of these things. It's really how we feel about each other is very negative, right? So that's true. But I've also had experiences through Undivide Us and through working, with the Pluralist Lab, and I've realized that there's really deep interest in engaging. And what's happening is that we are overestimating how extreme the other side is, right? And if you dig deeper, you realize that the most polarized folks, the folks who say, I don't want to have anything to do with, the person who, you know, is on team blue or team red, I can't be in the same room with them. That's a small percentage, right? It's 8% on either side, roughly speaking. But they create the impression that we're all, at loggerheads with each other. And I think that's what's creating all this tension. So yes, it is the case that we are deeply polarized, and we see this. If you're on cable news, you see this. If you're on social media, you see this. But when you actually do the engagement, when you actually have people sitting and talking to one another, you see that the reality is different, and there's so much potential for us to, begin to build on that, and to engage and to connect with one another.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with Ben. I think there's reasons for concern and there's reasons for optimism, right? I think, akin to what he was talking about in terms of the polling numbers, the fact that political violence is becoming everybody's concern. Pew did a poll at the beginning of October, right, where they said 30% of Americans say people have to resort to violence to get our country back on track. That is up from 19% in April of 2024. And that comes after, Charlie Kirk's assassination, the murder of a legislator and her husband in Minnesota, an attack on another family in Minnesota, the firebombing of the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, and, of course, the assassination attempts on President Trump. Um, I think it's really concerning that those numbers are especially visible around younger adults, that we have encouraged them to see words or lack of words. Silence is violence, or words are violence. But it's not confined to them. So, I think we're at a point where we need to do something different with the rhetoric because we're at a very scary tipping point. But like Ben, I'm optimistic. I mean, that was the thing that back when we were shooting this documentary and what we have seen with Undivide Us in screenings even, is that people are craving that connection again. People want to be able to have these conversations. And I think more, you probably can talk to this even, more deeply. But I think that people do, there are definitely, extremes where, people are done. They don't want to talk to other people. They've decided that they're in a camp and that's where they're hanging out, and that's them. But I think there's a majority of people out there who see the problem and want to do something different.
Yeah, I would add I'm pretty sure it was the morning of, or it might have been the afternoon before the Charlie Kirk assassination. I live in Utah, and I've got four kids who have gone to Utah Valley University. My wife went back to school to get her degree there. We have our high school graduations there. Had a nephew that was right there, a friend that was on the front row. It was just very personal, aside from the obvious of just an assassination. But on the day of, there was new data released showing among college students that 35% of college students expressed that sometimes political violence is justified. That's a high number. And I've heard people say, oh, yeah, it's all the blues, it's all Democrats, oh, it's all the Republicans. No, the numbers were almost identical with both. In fact, the Republican number was higher from the data that I saw. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we have been trained to believe no longer that one is wrong and right, but one is good and one is evil. And then when you start equating words with violence, you start suggesting that, well, violence is a good response to violence and therefore move forward. And so accountability to our language matters across the board. I was doing an interview with Politico just last night, and they were saying we got some new data, says that, I can't remember the exact numbers, but the reporter was basically telling me that we got all this data showing that Americans are not very optimistic about the future of the country. Think our best times are behind us, and that we can't solve this issue of that. She said, "What do you think about that? What are you guys doing? Is it really working?" And I said, it's interesting. I actually thought when she was sharing me that I think there's an interesting silver lining to the very depressing numbers in that data. And that is, people do not make change in their lives when they do not recognize a problem. And perhaps as a society, while I believe two ideas coexist in my mind right now in the work we're trying to do here, that our work has never been more difficult, especially after that assassination attempt and then the going to our tribal corners and thinking, no, I'm not going to go talk to somebody that doesn't want me to exist or doesn't want me to hear or express my opinion. But at the same time, perhaps we are reaching the point as a people to recognize the insanity of it all. Because data has shown us for a long time that people know this isn't healthy, but they're not seeing a different path. And so maybe those data points are telling us that maybe we're finally able to come to terms with the fact that, no, this is a problem. And we, the people, have to be the people and own it and drive change instead of acting like I have nothing to do with it. Because we all do. We own this. This is our country. And if there's any country in the world where we can make a difference, it's this one.